we're gonna just jump right into some questions here. So we have some serious questions, but I always feel like it's nice to get to know everybody a little bit. And so we're gonna do a little bit of a fun question first, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes. So Barry, you talk last. So I'm gonna ask you first. You have a delightful accent. It's Irish, obviously, but you said you live in North Carolina. Can you give us the brief story on how you landed in North Carolina?
Sure, yeah. So I work for Cook Medical and I worked for them in Ireland for 6 years, their European headquarters. I also lived in France and Austria, and they asked me if I'd come over for 3 years to do a stint here in the US, and that was 23 years ago, and I'm still here.
Well, the accent is still strong, which is great. I think the Irish accent is probably my favorite of all of the variants of accents. So good stuff. And then, Lisa, I had to ask Danny and Chris a good question to ask you. And I think they were both very impressed with the caliber of birthdays that you throw for your kids. So, can you share
I,
with us?
I like that she did not know where that question was
Yeah.
coming
Oh,
from.
yeah. Correct. I know. Lisa was like, this strange guy Mike is gonna come out swinging or something.
Really appreciate the number of birthdays you've
Yeah.
had.
So what it maybe like either a noteworthy one or what's the craziest birthday party you've pulled off for your kids?
Ooh, I don't know if they're crazy. I just think it's really important to really celebrate birthdays and make sure they feel special. So I have a standard tradition, like while they're asleep at night, the night of their birthday, or the night of their birthday, I decorate their room so they wake up and there's like decorations everywhere and they need to, break through a wrapping paper doorway and that kind of thing. My son, so that's a standing one. And then my son is going to be 13 on Saturday. So we are taking a bunch of 13-year-old boys tubing. And then he's getting tickets to a Zach Bryan concert because he's never been to a concert, is what he's been claiming. Um, so my plan is to like be hanging like pictures of Zach Bryan all around his room along with the decorations, and that's what he'll find out when he wakes up. So yeah.
That's fun. All right. I might have to call you for advice someday, Lisa.
Yeah.
I think Glenda's worried about what question you're about to
Oh
ask her.
yeah. Well, Glenda's also wild because when I met with her a couple months ago, she talked about loving ultra marathons. And so, I mean, there's the crazy people who run marathons, and then there's the extra crazy people who run ultra marathons. Glenda, what's the farthest distance you've ever ran in a competition?
It was 375 miles, and it took me
Wow.
6 days. And it was a 1 mile loop in New Jersey.
A 1 mile loop?
Yeah,
Wow.
it makes it easier that it's a mile because you don't have to carry much because everything's just a mile away. So,
You're insane in a great way. That is
yeah.
I remember that stuck with me so hard. Look at Danny. Danny, I don't think knew that that question was coming, and I think he's still trying to process what's going on.
Just as a total aside, I in a previous life did a lot of biking, and I was on this trip with this guy, and he was struggling, and we were like, "Didn't you train for this?" And he was like, "Yeah, I trained." And we were like, "You had to do, I forget what it was. It wasn't 370 that long." But he was like, "I trained. It was on a 0.5 mile loop." And he did all of his training miles in a circle. So anytime on this trip there was like a mild hill, he struggled on it. And I actually loved him more for that because you have a certain level of mental fortitude
Yeah.
to be able to kind of withstand that repetition. So that's my face right now. That's impressive. That's really cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that you all know a little bit more about the guests, let's bust into it on some of the questions. So I'll ask the first question and Danny will ask the second. But Glenda, since we just heard about your crazy willingness to run far distances, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in your industry as it relates to sustainability?
Yeah, so I would say my industry circularity is just top of mind, and there's just so many different circular strategies, such as like reducing, reusing, repurposing, remanufacturing. I recently learned about something called rethinking, and I know at Allison we remanufacture our transmissions, which means about approximately like 65% of our parts get reused and assembled into an official like retran transmission. And then other ways companies can be like more sustainable is by upgrading to like energy efficient machinery, HVAC systems, switching to LED lighting, using renewable energy, and then substituting single-use products to reusable ones in like the manufacturing plant. So I know for us, we did a pilot program recently where we switched over to reusable oil absorbents rather single-use ones, and then we ended up saving over 90,000 pounds of waste. And then the other big trend is definitely like technology and just the numerous software and trends and tools available to help companies keep track of like the different sustainability metrics such as scope 1 and 2 emissions, energy consumption, water usage, things like that. And like earlier this year, we began using foresight management. You guys helped us collect and track our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And there's so much that goes into it, especially for scope 3. So I'm really thankful that you guys are partnering with us to help us, because otherwise I wouldn't even know where to start.
Oh, thanks, Glenda. I promise we didn't pay Glenda to say that. But yeah, thanks for the kind words. And yeah, you're like spot on so many of those things. Specifically, remanufacturing and circularity is becoming more of a popular trend. We're seeing aerospace and automotive are probably the two biggest industries where a lot of remanufacturing happens, but we are starting to see Glenda, other industries follow. I think the aerospace and the heavy duty.
It makes sense because the material you use is high value, right? And so there's a lot of incentive to reincorporate it back into the manufacturing process. And I think just as to call out the distinction of, like, I heard you both say reuse and circularity within the processes, and we've seen that. And the efficiency in those pieces, we've seen that within LED lights and all of those pieces for a while, but now also just within the products themselves, right? Is like a whole other element of trend. And I think worth noting, I think that checks with a lot of the other stuff we've seen.
That's great. Lisa, talk to us about what you're seeing in the furniture industry around sustainability.
Yeah. And so I missed this in my intro too, but we do operate into two distinct segments. So one is commercial office furniture and the other is residential building products. So we sell fireplaces and stoves. So I would say from the commercial office furniture segment, I think our industry is really proactive and kind of leading in some of this space. So I would say it's moving beyond corporate goals and commitments and really trying to demonstrate the sustainability of our products. So with that, we're seeing, the circular piece, lower embodied carbon push. I think we've seen that in the new LEED V5 standard coming up too. So I think making sure we're making improvements and reductions and driving those principles into our product design. And really thinking about it up front. We've been working for a long time in getting all of our manufacturing facilities to zero waste to landfill, working on our corporate, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, but really trying to pull that into all the products we generate. On the residential home building side, I think, affordability, efficiency in homes is a big piece, obviously. And I think we've made some product improvements this year that I'm really proud of with our Supreme X fireplace, improving efficiency and natural gas utilization of that. So I think that goes a long way in helping our customers and improve efficiency, but also contributing to our scope 3 reduction.
Yeah, utilities are not getting less expensive for industrial manufacturing or residential ratepayers.
I feel like the corporate goal to product goal shift is like important to call out, right? Because I think in some ways it shows the maturity of the market, right? Yeah. Like it was easy, we all had sustainability reports 10 years ago, and we were talking about the business as a whole. And now companies are really being asked to dig into, how is that showing up into the products you're selling? Yeah. Lisa, I know you guys are doing like the work around LCAs and all those, and that's such a good example of, just understanding the product impact, right, of things and how do those corporate goals translate into literally the products that companies are buying.
Well said. Okay, Barry, talk to us about what you're seeing in the medical device and medical field around sustainability.
Yeah, it's interesting. As Danny was saying, I think we're sort of seeing the same corporate goals versus product specific goals. I guess we also see a lot of regional differences. So, about half of our business is international, about half of it's domestic. Definitely Europe is on the forefront in terms of what their expectations are. Also, because we're in the healthcare space, about half the healthcare dollars come from the government, whether you're in the US or whether you're in Europe, about half the healthcare dollars come from the government. So the government also has a vested interest in most countries in pushing sustainability. So I guess what's also challenging is at one time in medical devices, all medical devices were pretty much reusable. They were like stainless steel or something like that, and now they're primarily disposable. So there's almost a back to the future. How can you drive sustainability in when you've moved from stainless steel devices to single-use disposable devices? So what sort of biomaterials can be used, or can you have take back programs for these devices? Or looking just at it from an LCA perspective, can you just design sustainability better into the devices from the get-go? So those are some of the things we're seeing. And I guess the other general one coming out of Europe would be regulatory, CSRD, Corporate Social Reporting Directive, which is not specific to the medical device industry, but that's been a big effort for us in the last year or so as well.
Yeah, I mean, working with Cook, I think one of the interesting pieces is like how close you are to government climate goals, right? Is because a lot of times the buyers are directly held accountable to the,
Yep.
goals that these governments are posting. And so all of a sudden, in other industries, there's a little bit more distance in that. We have a lot more conversations around that. And I think that's
Yep.
just it changes, how you have to approach a lot of these things and understand the context that it sits in. So yeah.
Yeah, and we're hearing that across the board, Barry, which is Europe is significantly further ahead. It seems like California is also starting to
Yep.
pass laws that are somewhat similar to the ones in Europe. So it's interesting because you're right, the future of sustainability is here. It's just not shown up evenly across the geographical footprint of the world.
Yep.
But again, global companies, which all three of you are finding, hey, somewhere where we're doing business is really starting to ask for it. But yeah, I agree with you, Danny, and you kind of pulled this thread out after Lisa, but really like it's been interesting. 5 years ago, everyone was talking about operational carbon, and now all three of you at some point referenced something around product level carbon and product level sustainability. And that is a really interesting trend to see and look at. So I'm going to hand it over to Danny to ask the next level of questions. But as a reminder for all of you who are attending, we intend to have some question time at the end. So if you have questions on anything any of our three panelists have mentioned now or over the next number of questions, don't be afraid to type that down in the Q&A chat or in the chat, and we will hopefully have some time here at the end for questions.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll just cycle through the same order again, if that's okay. I think, Glenda, to you, given the trends of this year and the things that you just spoke on, what has been your focus and strategy to kind of manage that over the past year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say the first half of the year, I was focused on the regulatory prep work, like working on the double materiality assessment for CSRD, as Barry mentioned, before that was pushed out, as well as planning out for the 2024 data collection processes to calculate our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions for California Senate Bill 253. That's something new that we haven't done before, so it definitely took a lot of prep work to do that. And then the second half was focused on understanding the Dana off-highway acquisition and its impact to us on global sustainability regulations. So for example, like Allison alone, we only operate a manufacturing site, one parts distribution center, and then mainly sales offices in Europe. And so because of the omnibus changes that we had, we were potentially out of scope or being pushed into like the furthest wave of reporting. Now, because we're joining together and we have substantially going to have a lot more employees and more European manufacturing sites, we've been brought back into scope, and then just the timing has been pulled forward. So I've just been trying my best to try to understand all the regulatory implications that are coming out of this acquisition.
Yeah, this year's been a year.
Yeah, it has been a year. And interestingly, I don't think we intentionally did this, but Lisa and Glenda are both in organizations who did significant acquisitions. And then the other thing I think that's interesting for both of you is depending on how you parse both of them, you in some regards bought companies not necessarily always larger than you, but like Glenn, in your case, more like personnel and footprint despite smaller revenue, and obviously, Lisa, a little different look for you guys as well, but is a company who we did that last year, bought a company the same size as us. There's a lot that goes into basically saying, hey, in certain metrics, we're effectively doubling overnight. So yeah, that's really interesting, Glenda. The just kind of how do you put all the pieces together?
Yeah, and what all these regulations a lot of times are built off of some sort of static idea of what a company looks like, and in
Size.
reality, whatever organic or
Inorganic.
inorganic growth happens year over year, and that is its own challenge. And I think specifically when so many of these things are built off of that, and now we have to constantly quantify, where that boundary is.
Yes.
It's presenting new challenges, right? For greenhouse gas, for reporting, all these other pieces that checks. Lisa, I'll ask you the same question. Based on the trends over the last year, what's been your focus and strategy?
Yeah, I think I am lucky that we work for an organization that is really committed to sustainability. So our overarching strategy has not changed. We continue to drive the same initiatives around the same goals and have commitment there. So I feel like even though there's so much noise in the marketplace, like that has remained steady, which I'm really happy about. I do think that we've been listening and watching and tracking all that noise too, though. I think with EU, EPR at the state level, PFAS, there's so many things that we need to be thinking about from that regional perspective, whether it be country or state level. So I do think that has created a lot of additional reporting work for us, or back and forth on we're in, we're at, not in. CBAM has been one of those things that we've been working on for a portion of our business. So I think there's been a lot there this year.
Yeah, I think, Lisa, you're bringing up kind of a big macro trend we're seeing across all of our clients, and you said it really clearly there, which is the reporting burden seems to be growing. And it seems like a lot of companies are acknowledging this and asking either trade associations or federal governments to try to figure out how to unify expectations around reporting so that you can manage it, because we're seeing that all over the place. EPR is a great example where every state that's passing EPR laws, they're all slightly different. And so it's like it does seem like at some point, probably not in this administration, but at some point in the future, like this seems like something the federal government should be stepping into and saying, hey, we're going to do this. And you saw this, like Barry, you referenced with the CSRD, is like that's a European EU thing where it's like then it applies to all member states. So it's like that is an interesting trend, which is with everything getting kind of broken down into smaller pieces, it seems like the reporting burden on industrial manufacturing clients is increasing, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say we were moving in that trend of trying to align, right, with CSRD or SEC. And now we've taken a further step back to more individual state level or broken, like dispersed regulation. Yeah.
Doesn't make it easier. I'll throw the same question to you, Barry. Given, the trends over the last year, what has Cook's strategy been this year?
Yeah, a lot of similarities with Lisa and Glenda, and the regulatory side has been a big part. Obviously, EPR, PFAS, CSRD in Europe, the Senate bills in California, and I'll add to that the ASRS in Australia. So a whole lot of regulatory burden that's taken up a lot of time in the last year. And then I think the other thing that we've worked closely with Foresight on is putting together a 10-year decarbonization roadmap. So we had Foresight come in and audit all of our manufacturing plants in Australia, Denmark, Ireland, the US, do 2-day audits of each of those plants and put together a really good 10-year decarbonization roadmap. So that's been really helpful, I think, to try to rally everybody around the one plan. And what we noticed within the company is a lot of different jurisdictions, a lot of different entities within the company were doing their own thing a little bit and working themselves. So pulling all of that together and having that 10-year decarbonization plan together with Foresight that's been really helpful for us this year.
Yeah, I mean, Mike and I both got to take part in that work, which was a lot of fun. And I think one of the interesting and kind of cool pieces about that work with you, Barry, was like you just named, is there was good work being done in all of these spaces.
Yeah.
And to kind of tie it to this regulatory trend, to avoid having different answers across all of these different spaces, there's a benefit to kind of this aggregation and kind of corporate strategy too, right? And so essentially the work wasn't finding, it wasn't us saying, here are all the things you need to do. And certainly there was an element of that, but it was here are all the things that are already kind of being identified, and here's how they work together for like a larger corporate strategy. And then that gives you kind of a backbone for all these different disparate state level and country level reporting pieces. You have one document or one, 10-year plan type of thing. And I might be oversimplifying that a little bit, but I think we're seeing that a lot, right? It's like, people have been doing good work for a while, but now because all these questions are coming at a high level, there's a benefit to pulling that work up off the front line per se and into the C-suite.
I think you're exactly right. And this is a trend all of you have touched on that we're seeing across all of our clients, which is sustainability used to be thought about as ROI, and there's still definitely like a return on investment to sustainability. But now there's like this concept of risk, and you guys have all touched on it in different times, which is as new laws come into place, if you don't already have existing infrastructure built to comply with them, that can often be a massive distraction to a business. And so what we're seeing is a lot more companies are tolerant of saying, hey, we're actually going to go a little further than what we think the regulatory environment is asking us to. And the reason why is because we know it's going to come eventually. And when it does come, instead of us going from hey, we have 18 months to scramble so we can comply when it comes due, they can say, hey, we're actually already complying with this law when it's passed, which allows C-suites to stay focused on what is the vision of our company? How do we make, the best furniture, the best fireplaces, the best transmissions, the best medical devices? Your C-suite can stay focused on that instead of saying, well, what's coming in Europe or what's coming in California or who's passing this crazy thing? That definitely seems like it's a good point, Barry, of like companies are trying to get ahead of it a little bit more, so they're not left scrambling.
I think one thing I'd add to what you said, Danny, is just I think having a global plan helps with efficiencies. So people aren't off working on their own little, there's never enough resources. So doesn't have enough resources in other areas, but pulling them all together helps with prioritization and efficiencies. You sort of say, well, what really moves the dial? Because there's a lot of people working on things that don't really move the dial. And then, if these one or two things really move the dial, let's prioritize them and let's be more efficient about how we do them.
Yeah.
So that is so well said. And that is also a trend we're seeing, which is more corporate control over decision making, right? It used to be every plant ran its own profit and loss. And now you're seeing, like, especially IT with data hacks, sustainability, other things. You're exactly right, Barry. A lot of corporates are pulling some of those major decision making functions up to corporate. Cool. Well, great conversation. Let's talk about challenges that your organizations are facing. I know you guys have touched on some of them a little bit, so you're welcome to rehash or bring up new ones. But Glenda, talk to us. What are the biggest challenges that Allison is facing?
Okay, so I have two major challenges. Kind of both have already been brought up, but the constant changing in the regulatory space, I feel like it's just always changing. So like back in February, when we finalized our double materiality assessment, the European regulators came in and then they announced their intention to pause and delay CSRD. So even though the data still needs to be updated, like it was so good to like learn about the process so we know what to expect next time. And then right now we're also in a similar situation with the California Senate bill. So we didn't know when the California Senate bill 253 scope 1 and 2 emissions reporting was due until recently. And then there's like the misaligned information about what the law states versus what will be enforced. So I am glad, though, that the reporting deadline was pushed to August, although that's still going to kind of be like tight timing since we still plan to get limited assurance on our data. And then the second big challenge, I would say, is like all the global packaging, EPR laws. And for those who do not know, EPR stands for Extended Producer Responsibility. But the fact that every state has their own categories for material classification just makes it a challenge when we're trying to come up with like a single depository for like all the parts and all the packaging. It would be so helpful if all the states just followed like the same classification breakdown. And it's also just like a challenge to do the preliminary assessment to determine like how much packaging is even sent to a certain state to determine like if we're in scope, because like they have like the 1 metric ton threshold. So far it's been a pretty manual process. But we've been trying to create like a systemic way to automate it as much as possible.
That checks. I feel like
Mhm.
with CSRD, with the TCFD, the California laws, at least there was a global attempt, right? TCFD
Like
was
a framework, right? There's somewhat of a similar, right? If you do the CSRD, you're probably 90% of the way to Cali, right?
yeah, I think there's overlaps, right?
Yeah.
And the EPR laws don't seem to be the case. I think when we did the Indiana offsite or onsite and the Grand Rapids onsite, we had one of the lawyers there talking about EPR laws, and he was like, some of these just conflict like across states. So that I mean, we've heard that in a number of different
Well, yeah,
capacities.
and some of them are more focused, like multiple of you have mentioned PFAS. Some of them are more focused on like specific chemicals, where others are focused on specific materials and volumes.
Mm.
And that also, like, yeah, oh man, it's what a
Well, I
mess.
think like I mean, I've been involved in projects where we're just trying to figure out the bill of material, the bill of materials, like because it's not. It feels like it should be simple, but
Yeah.
these, complex manufacturing is inherently complex, right? With a complex supply chain, with people coming and going and moving and shifting and changing throughout. I mean, this is a boundary shift piece too, right? Like you're not just sending one package to a state per year and then we know how much it was. It's literally daily happening, right? And then there's a tracking mechanism and where those boundaries exist and what the weights are associated with them and all the other pieces and classification is it's not as simple as the laws tend to make it. And now we have 50 of them across or not 50, but
We could have
we
50.
could have 50 across the country.
What a mess. Lisa, talk to us about what you're seeing for challenges at H&I.
Yeah. I think similarly, EPR, trying to figure out how to get that data in a non-manual method and in a repeatable method is one of, I think, the items that we're working towards. The other big thing outside of the regulatory changes is really figuring out ways to consolidate our supplier outreach. So, we've been working on chemical transparency outreach. We've been working on PFAS outreach, but we want to start getting more primary greenhouse gas data from suppliers, but we want a consolidated tool to do that. So that's something big we've been looking at is how do we bring all of those questions and how do we improve kind of our method of asking all of these things of our suppliers. So it's a challenge I think that we haven't quite solved yet, but one that has really been something we've been working on, particularly in the last few months. Um, and then I think the other big thing, is just change within our organization. We're running a new operational structure, so kind of aligning the way we report our goals within that structure, changing some of our steering teams, and then with this new acquisition, that will be a big focus for next year. Is how do we align there? So I feel like we've had really good governance, but how do we adapt to these changes that are happening within our own organization?
Good. The supplier outreach one that you brought up, Lisa, is one that so I went to Climate Week this year in New York, and it was interesting. I think one of my takeaways on that was like it's almost two different efforts, right? Because the effort in asking the questions and creating the relationships and the pathways for that communication to flow is one, and then where to put it is a different
Mhm,
question,
mhm.
right? Because you can get information from suppliers, but then to really parse it out and understand like where it fits within the larger ecosystem is not a simple job, right? It's not all suppliers are the same supplier, right? Some are vertically integrated and some are broad, right? And so their data isn't necessarily apples to apples in that respect. And so you can't just say, well, I have three suppliers that do steel. Well, those three suppliers might do steel in different ways, right? And so then to compare them against each other based on one data set isn't inherently right. And so then but you need to ask the question because you don't even know how, like, who's going to answer it, how they're going to, what software they're going to put it in, those pieces. And then the other side of that is a whole different thing. And I think that there are solutions bubbling up on both of those because I think the data piece and the transparency piece, the tagging piece is definitely real across the industry. But I think that like everything, there's almost more granularity being driven into this, more deeper understanding as we learn more, and then realizing, oh, these are two different tool sets.
Yeah, and this is probably like a decades-long project. What you're going to be talking about is scope three and value chain. There's so much there, and again, it's easy for companies to do scope one and two, right? You have control over that. Scope three, at best, you have influence, and so a lot of companies, I think, are having to figure out how to flex those muscles that they haven't had to flex before, which is how do I influence my supply chain?
Yeah.
How do I collaborate with my suppliers? Go ahead, Lisa.
The other thing I was thinking of is like, to your point, Danny, it's like there's multiple issues we have to solve. It's like, what's our database for the questions? How do we ask them? How do we educate? But then also, how do we operate in these quasi approaches? It's like using industry average and actual data, whether we're doing scope three or greenhouse or EPDs and LCAs. It's like we're going to have these like mixes of data sources coming in for this period. So there's a lot to solve there. Like, I think before we ask a lot of the questions, we try and figure out how we're going to store it and make sure that we have a method to act on it. So that's one of the big challenges for us.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's so as an engineer, it's so easy to get sucked into like trying to solve the data quality problem and remembering to take a step back and being like, oh, how do we actually act on this, which you kind of named, and what do we do with this information once we get it great, is just, it's really what we're trying to do here.
It's
So.
a lot to cook on. Barry, talk to us about what challenges you and Cook are facing.
Yeah, I would touch on packaging again from our customers' perspective, from a hospital perspective. Outside of greenhouse gas emissions, packaging is their key priority. In addition to those EPR laws, we also have the PPWR regulation, packaging and packaging waste regulation coming in Europe, which is going to be pretty significant for us to plan for the next 2 years. And I guess what's unique in the two things that are unique, I guess, in the medical device industry, one is packaging is often contaminated with blood or bodily fluids. So how do therefore it goes to incineration. So how do you deal with contaminated packaging? And then the second thing that's challenging in the medical device industry, it's a very regulated industry, whether it's the FDA here in the US or FDA equivalents around the world. So making changes and product life cycles are very long. So it's very hard to like you can't use virgin. You have to use virgin plastics pretty much for medical devices. So there's some challenges like that I guess are unique to the environment that we work in healthcare.
Yeah, that checks.
Yeah, that's hard you have the parallel of regulations around packaging and regulations around what you can do with your packaging because you're medical devices. In some regards, you may be like, I'm playing with my arms tied behind my back. It's hard. Yeah, that's difficult. Great. Well, so let's talk a little bit. Last question for each of you is we just talked a lot about what we've seen, what you're doing, what challenges you're overcoming. Let's take a little time and turn our gaze forward. We're close to 2026. It's crazy. We're a little over a week from Christmas and a little over 2 weeks from New Year's. What are you seeing coming in 2026, Glenda?
Yeah, so in 2026, I'll be working with my new Dana off-highway colleagues to update and refine my compliance plan for all the regulations we've been talking about, so like the California Senate Bill, CBAM, CSRD, CSDDD, and just the various EPR laws. I also need to come up with like a common sustainability strategy for Dana off-highway drive motion systems and Allison Transmission. So working with all the global relevant stakeholders and figuring out what their plan is going to look like. But I mean, overall, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to expanding my horizons and learning from the Dana off-highway team.
Yeah, there's a lot of sustainability strategy I'm hearing there, which is great. And we're hearing that too, which is we have finite resources to spend on sustainability. So we want to make sure that every dollar we spend is the best possible use. And so, yeah, you're putting two companies together. I can totally see how it's like, well, what has Dana been doing? What have we been doing? What's the same? Kind of how do we all integrate that?
What do we not need to do? I mean, I think that's I think I was with a client last week and that was, we're not short of things that we all want to do and could do and need to do, but strategy inherently is what are the things that we're not going to do this year in 2026? And that takes some effort to deprioritize some stuff.
Deprioritizing is important. Lisa, before I jump over to you, I do want to remind all the attendees, we're just a couple minutes from wrapping up our questions here. So if you have questions for the panelists or for us, don't hesitate to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'd love to address those in a moment. So Lisa, talk to us about what you see coming here in 2026 for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of the same. Hopefully not reacting to regulations, driving more proactive system to handle them, driving our strategy, resetting goals. Our SBTI goals are due to be reset, so these are a big thing that we'll be working on. The other thing that I think was a big top of mind for me this year was sustainability value proposition and making sure we can show that with hard numbers. And I think that will be a thing that I continue to drive in 26, is particularly with our new organization, is like, how do we make that more part of the conversation with our waste and energy projects or with our customers and the data that we're receiving back from their request or their bid requirements. So I think continuing to expand on that within our organization, because anecdotally we know a lot, but how do we quantify that better and improve that process?
I can't help but ask a follow-up there, because that's so fascinating and something we talk about a lot, which is quantifying the benefit of sustainability. It seems like you've hinted at this, but I don't want to just assume you're talking about quantifying not only the benefits for improved efficiency and reduced materials, which is like a dropping of the bottom line, but also an increasing of the top line, which is like we get more sales opportunities if we have more level certified products. Can just confirm you're thinking about it in both directions, right?
That's right. So this year we actually implemented a project in Salesforce to be able to track this. So integrate with like bids and RFPs to be able to track the questions coming from sustainabilities and really trend those better, because a lot of that has been manual and reactive. So we want to be able to really integrate that into our Salesforce process in an improved way. And that's just the start of like, how do we start to quantify these things? But that was like an easy action I could take this year, I think, to begin that process.
Press. We talked to a lot of different companies, and I've not heard many be able to do what you're talking about. And yeah, maybe small now, but I really think that's the future, right? Most companies in business still in 2025 are very competitive around the major things people make buying decisions on: price, quality, when can you get it to me? And so a lot of times it seems like kind of a fourth decision criteria is sustainability. So that's really cool. You're like doing the work to quantify, like, hey, we're making these investments and it's actually like winning us business too.
I think that we've seen this too within how companies talk about sustainability. So the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of work being done around structuring reporting, right? And it has almost lost the narrative in it, right? As we've seen, and it's been helpful because it has coalesced around some of these regulatory requests. And you have GRI and SASB and other kind of like table-esque reporting pieces. And that is like, here are the metrics that, in theory, you could start to look at and match to your double materiality and all the things. And now we're starting to say, okay, but we still need the story on top of this, right? We still need to like explain and put these back into context. What do these metrics mean for my product? And that's, we can't start talking about that without having gone through that process. But I do think at this point, the narrative and the placement of that within a larger context, is really helpful. And so similar to what Lisa, you just said, it's like we're quantifying it, but then we're also like putting those quantified metrics in some sort of larger context, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Barry, talk to us about what you're seeing come in here in 2026.
I think for us, probably data. So if you look at the medical device industry, we're an innovation-driven business, but probably about 5% of the time is engineers really inventing, and 95% of it is testing, regulatory, quality, manufacturing. So we're very, very focused on AI, working closely with Palantir on how we can use AI to drive that 95% of what we're doing, be more efficient, be faster. So I think the challenge for me and for us is, how does that relate to sustainability? How can we use AI to as a part of life cycle assessments, or how can we use AI to help us with our greenhouse gas emissions? So a big focus for us, I think, is trying to understand the data better and what opportunity will AI have. It's a risk as well because there's all that power generation that's being used to create the AI. But on the flip side of it, what are we doing with the AI to make us more efficient in what we're doing from a sustainability perspective?
Barry, can you speak a little bit more to that too? Because I've had some window into, the different ways you're using that, and I think it's exciting, how you're applying that. And I don't know how much of that you can share and all the other pieces, but how does that look for Cook? How's that been
Um,
going?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're still in the early phases of it, particularly from a sustainability perspective. But I mean, I think we've sort of made the decision as a company that AI is going to be a key differentiator for us in the next 2 or 3 years. And I think what we're challenging ourselves to do is to rethink all of our processes, rethink all of our data, preempt problems in production, preempt problems with quality, preempt regulatory questions that we're likely to get using AI and using data. I think we've done quite a lot on that front. I think we've done a lot less on the sustainability side. The challenge for us is how can we use that infrastructure? How can we use that technology to help us from a sustainability perspective, like the examples that I gave, like data that we might use for life cycle assessments, or
Mhm.
or how we can do a better job with our scope 3 emissions, for example, in terms of partnering with supply chain.
Yeah, I think it goes back to even the conversation with Lisa of just like, starting we now have the tools to start to, pull from the supply chain, put things into context.
Mm.
And the AI has the ability to really to do that. I'll give an example that we use internally. So for scope three, finding emissions factors is actually really challenging. The matching suppliers to their emissions, you basically have to you have to name what the process is in order to basically be able to convert it to and understand where it sits. And so we use AI in that matching exercise. It still requires an expert's, kind of understanding of where the data is coming from. But it is supported in that And I think these data sets for scope three are just miles long. I mean, just
Yeah.
even the titles, right? There's libraries of this, and those data sets contain multiple coefficients within the data sets that are already, pages and pages long. So, being able to process that data is and using AI to do that and then create a competitive advantage because of that is really powerful. That makes sense.
Wild. Cool. Well, great. Well, this is the end of the formal question asking. We do have a question in the Q&A. As a reminder, if you have questions for Barry or Glenda or Lisa or us, feel free to type it in. So Jim asks, and this is relevant to all three of you because you all are suppliers to somebody and you all have extensive supply chain. So anyone's able to jump in on this. It says, as a supplier to large OEMs with our own large supply chains as well, how can we help our customers align or find similarities in data requesting? As OEMs, this is something you have to come across and worked with in your supply chain to accommodate different formats of emissions or data reporting.
So is this kind of both sides of it? Like how to
Yeah, I think
the OEM
you
and
can
then
answer either way, like which is what kind of questionnaire consolidation you're getting from you and how do you work to make it less burdensome for your suppliers?
I can give it a shot.
I was
So I
I
would,
was going to put you on the
yeah,
spot, Lisa, since you
yeah,
were
yeah,
already talking about suppliers. So.
yeah. I would say we are being thoughtful about how to reduce the requests to our suppliers and consolidate those requests to, single points in the year. And then I think also trying to find a consolidated tool because we don't want to overburden our suppliers. And we also touch points with them where we integrate it into our annual business reviews into their supplier scorecard so that they know they're being measured on sustainability and ESG, just like they're being measured on on-time delivery. So those conversations are now integrated into their regular process, as well as like when we have supplier meetings, we talk about sustainability so they have an idea of what's coming and we're not just throwing new things at them without any idea of that. From a customer standpoint, I think we are trying to utilize these new implemented tools within Salesforce to do a better job of aggregating what are the questions coming to us, how do we create more standard FAQs to help respond to those questions. But then we also use external tools like Ecomedes, right? Like we house all of our product level data in those tools to direct customers to that information. So we don't need to be the sole source of that. I think that's a big way that we help to aggregate that in a non-manual way. And that might be unique to the, built environment space.
Yeah, and can I echo that, Lisa, which is what you said at the end there. We're seeing across a lot of industries, which is automotive, furniture, et cetera. They have trade associations, and you typically have a number of OEMs all buying from the same suppliers. And so if a trade association can act as a intermediary and basically say, hey, let's bring all the OEMs in a specific industry together, and let's all agree on a standard reporting platform, a standard data structure, a standard set of whatever. It makes the reporting burden less for the entire supply chain within that industry. So I think, Lisa, your example of Ecomedes is fantastic and something we've seen really, I think, helps your point, the built environment folks report up. And, that's something like a BIFMA would help drive in other trade associations. And we're seeing this in automotive as well. So we're a member of a number of automotive trade associations. And same thing, that most of those trade associations are going to the global auto manufacturers and pushing on them. And I get, right, like a European auto manufacturer is going to have very different needs than a Japanese auto manufacturer, but at least if you can push as hard as you can. So I would encourage you, if any of you are working through that, trade associations are also another good spot to have that conversation where all of either the suppliers are in the room or the OEMs are in the room and kind of try to work through it.
Barry, can I direct this question at you? Because, with the use of AI, I think how what you feed that, right, is certainly something I know that you guys are thinking through. And also you kind of are, it sits right at the nexus of like both what it's being fed from the supply chain and these other pieces, but also in support of like what you're able to report out, right? And so I guess what tools have you found to be useful, in both data collection and data reporting, and which tools have been a little bit maybe burdensome or frustrating?
Yeah, I mean, I guess historically, Danny, we've used a third-party company called Ascent out of Canada, and they survey our suppliers once a year, and that's on an online portal. So that's the main way that we collect that information. And I guess very similar to Lisa, we have a supplier day where I present to the suppliers about what our goals are, what we're trying to achieve. We do a supplier webinar in January. We talk to our suppliers about, regulation that's coming, what sort of information we're collecting and why we're collecting it, why it's important to our customers. So that's what we're doing currently, Danny. I think going forward, though, to your point, and I don't think we've figured this part out yet, is how do we use AI to help us with that data? I think we could. You and Lisa were talking about it earlier on. You can collect a lot of data, and you can have a lot of different data points, but how do you make sense of that data, and how can you query that data in a way that's useful, and how can you open it up to a lot of different people within the organization to be able to query that data? Those are some of the things that we're certainly trying to wrap our arms around.
Do you think, and this is to whoever wants to answer this, do you think that there will be, or I'll put a thought that's in my head, is that there are different tools for different types of data. I know BIFMA, for example, the Business and Institutional Furniture Manufacturing Association, which is how we connect with a lot of the furniture clients. They have a chemical database, and then they also have, Lisa mentioned Ecomedes, which is a product database. I wonder, are you as a group or anybody on this call differentiating or thinking about the data sets in specific categories at this point? Do you think things are moving forward? Some are easier, some are harder. Maybe, yeah, I don't know who to direct that at, but.
I think they're ultimately some of the data sets are going to align, like, so they need to be workable in that way, right? Like from supply chain, we need primary data, but that's going to feed scope 3 and LCA. So I think they chemical data feeds PFAS and chemical transparency or REACH and other chemical regulations. So I think that the data needs to be accessible for multiple purposes. And that is like one of the hopes that I have is like with chemical transparency, if we ask for full material disclosure, we can then meet any regulation. That's a harder push for people to understand, but how do we kind of predict the future to have the harder goal and communicate the harder goal to help us succeed today?
No, that checks out. That makes sense.
I think, Danny, one thing I would add to that is we've done a lot of work this year to build a bill of substances. So we have a bill of materials. We've always had bills of materials, but once you dig below the bill of materials, we didn't have a bill of substances. So we've worked with Oracle to build a bill of substances that would be exactly what Lisa's talking about. So if somebody comes and asks us, tell us all the devices, we make 10,000 different devices. Which devices in Cook contain this chemical? Or this type of thing. So we've done a lot of work in the last year to move that bill of substances along, and we think that's going to be a really, really important part for us.
And that is super cool that you're doing it in Oracle because then your BOM and your chemicals all live together.
Yep.
That is like a dream state. Yeah.
Yep.
It's funny you say that, Lisa and Barry, because I was going to say I was just at a conference last week and met the head sustainability person for SAP in North America. And all of these ERPs are seeming to do exactly what you two are talking about, which is they're sitting here saying, if we're holding all of this data for you, why wouldn't we use AI and leverage other tools to basically allow you to understand like real, like they're even talking like live carbon footprinting as like product is running through your machines, right? Because some of these, especially like the Oracles and the SAPs of the world, like they have an unbelievable quantity of data. And organizations, specifically those organizations, have gone all in with one specific ERP. And so, yeah, I agree with both of you that seems to be a fascinating future that I think you wouldn't perceive those companies necessarily as AI plays. It may actually be really interesting AI plays over the next number of years, just in the fact that AI really can't do anything without the data, and they are just sitting on mountains and mountains of data.
Yeah. And I think fundamentally that will allow us to make better choices within our product because those data sets could be linked, right? Whether you're making a better chemical choice or you're making a better carbon choice, if those data sets are linked, when someone's engineering, it allows you to know what you're choosing.
Cool. Can I ask one kind of final wrap-up question to the group? We talked about challenges, we talked about focuses, we also like what we see coming. I think we put the bar, the vision a little bit farther out in the next 5 years. What's getting you guys excited? What's the stuff that that you're showing up for every day and that you're enjoying working on? I mean, you can say CSRD, but I won't believe you. Well, I want to hear, the stuff that keeps you going on a daily basis. Glenda, can
I
I
like the fact that, yeah.
direct to
So
you?
like the fact that we have these regulations, like trying to hold companies accountable in order to like try to do more sustainable practices is really important because it's like we only have one Earth. We need to take care of it, and especially like if it's especially like my generation, it's really prevalent. Like we're excited, and so it's like the fact that companies that have a much larger global footprint than just me composting isn't gonna stop climate change or but if corporations like start working together and implementing these changes, like that's going to have a much bigger impact. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, that's great.
Lisa, do you want to take a stab?
I would echo kind of what Glenda said. I mean, the impacts of climate change are only continuing to worsen. I truly believe this pendulum that we're in today will swing back. I think that and that gives me hope, right? Is like we have a purpose and this stuff does make a difference. The work that we're doing makes a difference. And to be a sustainable company, you need to have sustainability in the world. And so I think this will continue to be important.
Barry, what do you say?
The part that gets me excited, I guess, is just embedding sustainability into everything, into just, rather than it being a standalone function or standalone people like us that are very passionate, that it's sort of systemically embedded into LCAs or it's systemically embedded into procurement or supply chain. But it's the idea, being able to develop sustainable products and have differentiated products through sustainability, making it a competitive advantage. I think the idea of just raising the awareness of sustainability in terms of sort of trying to see it as an opportunity for companies so that we can drive that slow down climate change and the likes. But I guess the exciting part for us, I think the exciting part for us is sort of trying to be an interpreter between the sustainability world and all of these acronyms and that live in our world, and then engineering or quality or production or facilities. That part's exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think that actually really, it's a really good way to say what I've heard from a lot of other companies. I think the last 10 years, 15 years of sustainability has often been to protect the company from, a lot of the critiques, right? It's oftentimes the role of sustainability is to be, to help just
defensive role.
Defensive role and manage. And I'm seeing a lot more shifts into being like, look, I'm going to actually make your job easier.
This is the vision, right? Now you go from defensive to like, I'm gonna cast the vision for a future in which our product is more compelling than it's ever been.
Yeah. We have now, and Lisa, you said that, right? It's like that we're no longer just trying to make sure that our products are meeting specification, but we're showing that these sustainability things the attributes that we're infusing within our products make them more valuable and are going to generate more top line revenue. And I think that in different versions is the challenge.
Well, I'm going to leave it there. We are at the top of the hour. Glenda, Lisa, Barry, thank you so much for joining us. For all of you who attended, thank you so much for listening in on this conversation. We look forward to connecting with you here in 2026. And until then, we want to wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.
Happy holidays all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.